I remember the first morning I stepped onto that soil, the humid air pressing against my skin like an invisible weight. The jungle whispered secrets I wasn't meant to hear. Every rustle, every distant call was a reminder. Out here, silence was a weapon and a curse. My name is Jack, but out there, names were just noise. They called me something else, a ghost, a shadow, a man who moves without a sound but strikes like thunder. But I wasn't born a ghost, I became one. Before the war, I was just a kid from a small town chasing simple dreams. I wanted a life where the loudest sound was the laughter of my kids, where battles were fought only in stories. But fate has a cruel sense of humor. The jungle didn't care about dreams. I was trained to listen, to move without a trace, to blend with the darkness. But the real fight wasn't outside. It was inside. The battle between who I was and who I had to become. Every mission was a test, a question asked in silence. How far will you go when everything you knew is stripped away? I won't lie, fear was my constant companion. It crept in like the fog at dawn, cold and relentless. But fear kept me alive. It sharpened my senses when the world blurred. The enemy was more than bullets and bombs. They were shadows in my mind, doubts that threatened to unravel me. One mission changed everything. The intel was clear. High-value target deep in the heart of the jungle. Extraction at dawn, no room for error. I moved like a whisper through the leaves, every step measured, every breath controlled. The weight of my gear was nothing compared to the weight in my chest. When I reached the clearing, the world held its breath. The target was there, a man whose name meant chaos. Taking him alive was impossible. I had orders: neutralize and extract. What happened next wasn't in any training manual. The world exploded into chaos, gunfire, shouts, the primal roar of survival. But in that storm, I found a strange calm. Time slowed, senses heightened. I became the shadow, the silent strike. When the dust settled, the target was down, and I was alone, breathing in a world that suddenly felt foreign. But war isn't just about the battles you win. It's about what you lose when the guns go silent. I lost friends, brothers who never returned from the shadows. I lost parts of myself in the dark places no one talks about. But I also found something. A strength not born from weapons, but from will. The jungle taught me that silence can be louder than any shout. It taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward despite it. This is my story. The story of a silent warrior fighting battles you'll never see. And it's just beginning. The jungle never sleeps. Even when the moon hides behind thick clouds, the creatures below stir, reminding you that you are just another shadow in their world. I learned quickly that in this place, noise was death. Every snap of a twig, every crack of a leaf beneath your boot could spell the difference between life and oblivion. I remember the faces of the men I lost, friends who had become brothers, men who trusted me with their lives. Their absence is a silence louder than any explosion. The war wasn't just fought against the enemy, it was fought inside the cracks of your soul where fear and resolve clashed endlessly. I was a soldier forged in that relentless heat, shaped by the ghost that walked beside me. One night, under a canopy of stars barely visible through the dense leaves, we received word. The mission was simple in words, but impossible in practice. Infiltrate a heavily fortified enemy camp. Gather intelligence and exfiltrate without detection. The kind of mission that could end in glory or in nothing at all. We moved like phantoms, slipping through the jungle's veins, our breaths shallow, hearts pounding in rhythm with the night's pulse. The camp was alive with enemy voices, the glow of fires illuminating faces etched with suspicion and fatigue. Every step brought us closer to the edge, where a single misstep would ignite a storm. As we reached the perimeter, the silence shattered. Gunfire erupted like thunder. Orders shouted through the chaos. adrenaline flooding veins with a burning intensity. I fired without hesitation, the rifle an extension of my will, every shot calculated, every move precise. In those moments, time fractured. The world narrowed to the beat of my heart and the echo of gunfire. I found the target, a man whose cruelty was whispered in every corner of the region. Taking him down was not just a mission, it was a statement. The firefight was brutal. Bullets tore through the night. Men fell around me, but I pressed on, driven by a force beyond survival. When the dust settled and the camp lay silent, I was alone. Alone with the weight of victory and the burden of loss. The jungle didn't care who survived, it only cared about who moved silently enough to live. Years later, when the war was over and the world had moved on, I found myself haunted not by the battles, but by the silence that followed. A silence filled with memories that no one wanted to hear. I learned that true courage wasn't in the gunfire. It was in facing the aftermath, in rebuilding from the ashes of what you once were. This is the story of a man who became a shadow to protect the light of others. A story not of glory, but of survival. And though the war has ended, the battle within continues. The days after the war were the hardest to survive. The battlefield had moved from the dense jungles to the quiet corners of my mind. Faces blurred, voices faded, but the echoes of gunfire still thundered in my soul. Sleep was a stranger, and peace a distant dream. I tried to blend back into the world, a world that no longer made sense. The laughter of children, the hum of everyday life, the ordinary worries of people, it all felt foreign. How could they understand when silence had become my language? I took a job, any job, to keep myself tethered, but the noise of civilian life was overwhelming. It was louder than any battle cry. I was a ghost trapped in a world that moved too fast, too loud, too careless. One evening, walking home beneath the flickering streetlights, I realized something had to change. The silence inside me wasn't emptiness. It was a space waiting to be filled with purpose. I began to train again, not soldiers, but myself. To rebuild, to reclaim the strength that had carried me through the darkest nights. The discipline that once saved me would now be my salvation. Months turned into years. With every dawn, I pushed harder, running, lifting, learning. The war inside my head was relentless, but so was I. I found new battles to fight, this time against doubt, fear, and the weight of memory. The scars remained, but they became symbols of endurance, not defeat. Slowly, I discovered that survival wasn't enough. I wanted to live, to build, to find meaning beyond the gunfire and shadows. I started sharing my story, not for glory, but to remind others that even in silence there is strength. This is my journey, not just of a soldier, but of a man who learned to fight his own silence. The battle never ends, but neither does the courage to face it.